Hello guys, Bobo here. In the last couple of years we had new categories of swords emerging. Now we have a light, a medium, and a heavy longsword simulator, and representatives of all those types on the market from different manufacturers. Today we're gonna fence with them for a bit, using 3 common and accessible examples of those, and every couple of rounds we're gonna exchange swords, so all of us, people with different amount of experience and different physical attributes, can test them and play around with different weighted swords. Ironically, for the last 2 decades, the main debate on HEMA Longsword was focused on the length and the shape of the sword and the point of balance, not that much the weight. Longer and bigger feathers became common because tournament fighting worked well with feathers with big hilts and long blades. And they're not ahistorical. Both the few examples of actual historical feathers we have and longswords from the period, and by that I mean 15th, 16th century, exist that reach the same size and weight as modern longsword feathers. In the last couple of years, first through the company Bloss, and then later when Siggy created an entire line of it, we've had an emerging category of light feathers. They have become really popular for a variety of reasons, and we're gonna explore that. And now a third category seems to be emerging. Some models of Regine and the Siggy King Light, which we are using here, seem to be a representative of a medium category, which sort of arose by people wanting something that is not as heavy and as hard-hitting as the heavy longswords, but it is not as light and would be allowed in all tournaments, because not all tournaments allow lights. Now, for a long while, many tournaments put a maximum size around 1.7 kilos. Isn't it ironic that one of the main myths that HEMA people have been fighting for a long time is that medieval swords were cumbersome and heavy and hard to wield, and at the same time the tournament systems we've created started kind of favoring heavier swords. And also the culture that we had created in the last 20 years suddenly reacted to light swords, absolutely historical in weight, like they were somehow gonna break HEMA. We should note that length categories matter too, and that was where the bigger debate was for quite a while. Standard feather length are about 100-102 centimeters of blade length, and usually that leads to 1.5-1.6 kilo feathers. These have become common, even though, especially in earlier times, longswords were a little bit shorter on average. Such longswords definitely exist, although it would be debatable if you're studying earlier sources whether using a sword of that length is perfectly representing the techniques from that source. The other length of longsword simulators that is very common is the shorties. They're usually around 95-97 centimeters long in terms of blade. Usually they also have a slightly shorter handle, and they have also become quite popular to people who want something which is a little bit more compact. And then lights emerged, and let's talk a little bit about their purpose, the strengths and advantages, and the issues that arise with them. Sofia Cross Swords was one of the first tournaments in the world that when lights came out, we immediately created a light longsword category. First of all, one of the primary uses, I would say, for lights is using them for training, not so much for tournaments or competitive fencing. They're easy on the body, they allow slightly lighter protective gear, and in regular gear you can take a lot more repeated blows and harder blows and be okay, so in that regards they're perfect for training. They let people fence at high speed with less fatigue. I would also add from personal experience that if you have some slight injury and you want to get back in the game, but the injury is on the arms and or the hands or the wrist, and the regular sword feels a little bit heavy, using a light can get you there faster and allow you to start training earlier than if you had to use the heavier sword. And also, objectively, there are people who cannot handle a standard sword to the full capacity that they could if they used the lighter one, which is also why lighter longswords existed historically. What are the issues? Well, as we experience very quickly, judging becomes harder because athletic fencers drive those light blades really fast, and it becomes very high speed, very hard to follow. Edge alignment becomes harder to judge. Now, let's jump over the medium category and go over the standard category, or the heavy category, I would call it. Those swords have a lot more blade presence, as some would call it. I would say that they can carry momentum better and carry inertia better. So when you throw the blade, it doesn't stop as easily, which has disadvantages as it's gonna hit harder, but it also has advantages when you're jostling for the center and fighting in the bind. You're gonna have a little bit more success with a standard weighted sword of around 1450 kilograms and up to 1.7 kilos. You definitely are stronger in the bind and can dominate a little bit more. But on the other hand, it's more tiring, more likely to injure someone. Let's be clear, any kind of sword can injure even light, and you just can't do as many reps with one as you can with a lighter one. And so the medium category emerged. I would say that the Sea King Light, even though it's called a light, is actually a representative of that category. Some Reginae feathers are as well. Some Reginae feathers are also the ones that can get as light as the Sea Light category. And these swords have sort of appeared to fix an issue that some people think that light swords are too light, but they would like a lighter sword than typical. So these are around 1.3, 1.45 kilos. They can fence reasonably well against both lights and standard feathers. They hit harder than lights, but not as hard as heavy blades, and they have a pretty decent balance between both characteristics of light and heavy blades. I haven't used one yet in tournament, but my colleague Angel Chernaev has, and he's quite happy with it. The King Light specifically handles a little bit more like a real sword or a heavier sword, also because of the type of blade geometry it has. So what is the current tournament meta? Nowadays, most tournaments allow standard length feathers, and not all of them have a blade weight. So objectively, in a lot of tournaments, you can bring a light. Some tournaments, however, since the light category has appeared, have started just removing the lights as an option by putting a minimum weight limit. Now, this is where the medium blades come in, because those are lighter than standards, but are still heftier and hefty enough to cover those minimums than a lot of the lights. And some people have criticized that, but I kind of understand it. It's the same reason why we've also created light categories, usually with swords provided, where we basically limit the swords to be this exact size, length, and type. What is going to happen in the future? Are we going to have two entirely distinct HEMA Longsword categories? I think in general, tournaments would do well to have two main types of tournaments. Tournaments that allow light and medium swords, and tournaments that allow medium and heavy swords. I think that the medium sword can bridge the gap and can work in both worlds best, but the lights and the heavies meeting is not gonna be as fruitful. Generally, learning how to deal with different simulators is a good skill for a fencer to have. And different simulators also allow and encourage different styles of fencing. The key is to remember that different simulators are not teams that we have to choose. They're instead different tools to support different goals in terms of training, of tournament performance, of historical exploration, in terms of safety and accessibility, and different technical emphasis. The point is not to have a favorite or a category you don't like. The point is to understand what each class is good for and to organize your training to use the best tools for the job. Thank you and bye-bye.